The night Margaret Hill's life shifted, she was awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering when loneliness had become louder than grief. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made every tick of the clock feel like a reminder that time did not stop just because her heart felt tired. Then, without warning, her bedroom door slowly opened and everything she thought she understood about her place in this family began to change. Margaret was 61, widowed and living in a quiet suburban home in Ohio, the kind of place with neat lawns and neighbors who waved but never asked too many questions. Her life had settled into routines she could manage. Morning coffee by the window, grocery shopping on Tuesdays, church on Sundays, and long evenings filled with memories she never invited but always received. Her daughter Emily used to fill the house with noise, laughter, and motion, but that had changed too. 3 weeks earlier, Emily had arrived at Margaret's door with red eyes and packed bags. She hadn't shared details, only said she needed space from her marriage, from constant arguing, from feeling unseen. Emily moved into a small rental across town with the kids. Her husband Daniel stayed behind, unsure where to go, until Margaret offered the guest room without hesitation. She believed family didn't abandon each other, even when things were complicated. Daniel Carter was polite, quiet, and carried his stress like a heavy coat he couldn't take off. He helped around the house, fixed things Margaret had ignored for years, and never spoke badly about Emily. At first, their conversations stayed safe weather, work, the kids. But slowly, without either of them noticing when it started, they began talking about deeper things: regret, fear, the feeling of becoming invisible inside your own life. That night, Margaret hadn't been able to sleep. Her thoughts circled. The same question they had asked for years. Is this all that's left? She had just closed her eyes when she heard the door creak open. Her heart jumped. She sat up, pulse racing, as the shape of a tall man appeared in the doorway. "Daniel," she said, her voice low but steady. He froze like someone caught stepping into the wrong room of a stranger's house. The hall light framed his face, and Margaret could see instantly that something was wrong. His eyes looked tired, not sleepy, worn down. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I thought this was the guest room." "I wasn't thinking." Margaret nodded, pulling the blanket closer out of instinct. "It's okay," she said. "You scared me a bit, that's all." "I'll go," he said, already turning. She should have let him. She knew that. But something about the way his shoulders sagged made her pause. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said. "If you want, you can turn on the light." He hesitated, then reached for the switch. The room filled with soft yellow light. He didn't leave. Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. "I couldn't sleep," Daniel said. "My mind won't stop." Margaret understood that too well. "Mine either," she said quietly. He glanced at the chair by the window, then back at her. "Can I sit, just for a minute?" She nodded. Daniel sat down, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was holding something fragile. He stared at the floor, searching for words. "Margaret," he said after a long pause, "I need to say something. I don't know how to say it without it sounding wrong." Her heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from a strange sense that this moment mattered. "Then just say it," she replied gently. He took a deep breath. "I don't think I've been honest with anyone. Not Emily, not myself." Margaret stayed quiet. She had learned long ago that people spoke more freely when they weren't rushed. "I've been failing for a long time," Daniel continued. "At work, at home. I kept telling myself things would get better if I just pushed harder. But all I did was push everyone away." Margaret felt a familiar ache in her chest. She had watched her late husband do the same thing, carry the world alone until it crushed him. When Emily left, Daniel said, his voice tight, "I realized I didn't even know how to talk to her anymore. Didn't know how to be heard." He looked up at Margaret, then really looked at her. "But here, with you, it's different." She shifted slightly, uncertain. "You listen," he said. "You don't interrupt or judge. You just hear me. And when I sit at the kitchen table with you in the mornings, drinking coffee in silence, I feel something I haven't felt in years." "What's that?" she asked softly. "Peace." The words settled between them, heavy and honest. Margaret swallowed. She felt it too, that quiet understanding that didn't ask for anything but presence. "I'm not saying this because I want something," Daniel said quickly, standing up as if worried his honesty had gone too far. "I know where the lines are. I respect you. I respect Emily." She believed him. "I just needed you to know," he continued, his voice rough, "that you mattered to me during the hardest time of my life." Margaret's eyes stung. One had said that to her in years. "You matter too?" she said. "It's more than you realize." He nodded, emotion flickering across his face. "I'm sorry I came in here tonight. I shouldn't have. But I didn't know where else to put these thoughts." Sometimes, Margaret thought, loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from having nowhere safe to speak. "It's okay," she said. "Just be careful with your heart." He managed a small smile. "You too." Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Margaret lay back down, but sleep didn't come. His words echoed in her mind, not as something dangerous, but as something awakening. She hadn't felt seen in a long time, not as a mother, not as a widow, not as a woman. As the ceiling fan turned above her, Margaret realized this night had changed something inside her. Not because of what had been said, but because of what had been felt. And she knew, as the house fell silent again, that nothing between them would ever feel the same. The morning after Daniel walked into her bedroom, Margaret Hill woke up knowing something inside her had shifted. And there was no going back to the quiet version of herself she had been the night before. The sunlight felt sharper through the curtains. And the house no longer felt like a place where time stood still, felt like a place where choices were waiting. She stood in the kitchen early, holding a warm mug of coffee with both hands, staring out at the empty street. Her mind replayed Daniel's words again and again, not because they were dangerous, but because they were honest. For years, Margaret had been useful to others, but invisible to herself. Last night reminded her she was still someone who could be seen. She heard footsteps behind her. "Good morning," Daniel said softly. She turned. He stood in the doorway, looking careful, like a man stepping onto thin ice. "Good morning," she replied. They moved around each other quietly, both aware of the space between them, both aware of how fragile it felt. Daniel reached for another mug, poured coffee, and leaned against the counter. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said, "for last night." "You don't need to be," Margaret replied. "You didn't do anything wrong." He shook his head. "I crossed a line by coming into your room." "Even if nothing happened?" "What happened," Margaret said gently, "was honesty. That doesn't have to be a bad thing." Daniel exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. "I've decided. I'll move out this weekend." The words landed harder than she expected. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "It's time. Emily and I need space to figure things out without me hiding here." Margaret nodded, even though a quiet ache spread through her chest. She understood. Some things were meant to pass through your life, not stay. They sat at the table, the same table where they had shared silent mornings and careful conversations. Quiet felt different now, not heavy, just honest. "I don't know what happens next," Daniel said. "With my marriage. It's with my life. You don't have to know." Margaret replied, "Just don't stop trying." He looked at her, gratitude clear in his eyes. "You helped me more than you know." "And you reminded me," she said, "that my life isn't over just because one chapter ended." Daniel smiled at that dot later. That afternoon, Emily came by to drop off paperwork for the kids' school. Margaret watched her daughter closely. Emily looked tired, but calmer than before. "Dad would have liked Daniel," Emily said suddenly, glancing around the house. "He always said people don't break because they're weak. They break because they carry too much alone." Margaret's throat tightened. He did say that. Emily hesitated. Daniel told me he's moving out. Yes, Margaret said. I think it's the right step. Emily nodded. I hope we can talk again. Really talk. Margaret reached for her daughter's hand. You will. That evening, Margaret went for a walk for the first time in months. The air was cool, the sky wide and open. She realized she had been shrinking herself for years, confusing safety with stillness. Daniel moved out that Saturday. He packed quietly, thanked Margaret for everything, and hugged her once brief, respectful, full of meaning. Take care of yourself, he said. You too. She replied. The house felt empty again, but this time it didn't feel final. Weeks passed. Margaret joined a local book club after seeing a flyer at the library. She started walking every evening. She laughed more. She slept better. She stopped measuring her life by what she had lost. Daniel sent messages sometimes, simple ones. Updates. About work. Questions about books she recommended. Nothing crossed a line. Emily and Daniel began counseling. Slowly, carefully, they learned how to speak again without turning every word into a fight. One evening, months later, Margaret sat on her porch watching the sunset. Her phone buzzed. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't. I'll never forget that. She smiled, placing the phone beside her. What echoed in her mind wasn't regret or longing. It was something stronger. It was the knowledge that even in the later seasons of life, the heart can wake up not to break rules or chase impossible dreams, but to remember its worth. And for Margaret Hill, that was more than enough.